talking about three different general areas. The first is jurisdiction, or where you ought to be thinking about doing this. I want to talk a little bit about the contract or contracts that are entered into between the intended families and the donors and the surrogates. And is that better? And then thirdly, to talk about the process of establishing parentage, that is your legal relationship with the child. Starting at the top of that list, the jurisdiction is it's something that on the one hand is relatively easy to do. It's also extraordinarily important to do. It's good to hear that the winds have changed a little bit in New York, and New York might become the next state to allow surrogacy. The fact is that most states do, but some don't, and it's extraordinarily important to look at that. You have a state like Michigan as an example where it's actually a felony to engage in surrogacy, specifically paid surrogacy, which is most of what we end up by doing. The fact is that in most of these cases there's multiple jurisdictions involved, and so that oftentimes we'll find that the intended family is from a different jurisdiction than the surrogate, which is a different jurisdiction than the egg donor. Even fourth, you could have a different place of birth, and you could have the medical clinic in one jurisdiction, and you could have the agency assisting you in yet another. So the fact is that it's not unusual at all in our legal practice to see as many as 2 or 3 states involved in each one of these cases. And the first thing that we do is, and I'm suggesting that the first thing that you ought to do in looking at this process is to try to determine where the birth is going to occur, because that's probably the most important place. And that's the most important place because that's likely the place where the contract is going to be interpreted. It's likely the place, almost certainly the place, where the birth certificate will be issued. And as a result, you want to make, and it's also the place that in the extraordinarily unlikely event that there was some question over custody of the child and parentage of the child, it's the location where the lawsuit would take place to determine those issues. It's also something that in large degree is reasonably easy to figure out. There's a website called Lambda, L-A-M-B-D-A, Lambda Legal. It's actually, I believe it's an organization run by Kay Kendall in San Francisco.
Actually, that's NCLR.
Pardon?
Kate Kendall is the head of NCLR. Lambda Legal is in New York, but if I may.
Thank you. The point of it is that in fact, what you can, they have a great, Lambda Legal has a great website, and in that website, they go state by state and talk about marriage issues and parenting issues and establishing parentage in each one of the states. And the other thing you'll find is that it's not a crime, but you'll find like Washington State as an example where you can do an unpaid surrogacy, or sometimes referred to as a compassionate surrogacy, but your contract won't be enforceable if there is a financial element to it. And so again, it's something that you want to watch real carefully to find out just exactly what kind of support you're going to get from the courts if you need that support. Most of these questions can be answered fairly easily by the agency that you're working with. And most of the agencies are very capable of doing this. They know the laws in the various states. Although in our law practice, we do find a certain number where no one has looked at any of these issues, and people are coming from all sorts of directions without having any idea what state they're going to end up in and what state that they ought to look at to determine issues of parentage. You can always talk to a lawyer about it, and when you're looking at choosing a lawyer to assist you with this process, you want to have somebody who has significant experience with surrogacy and assisted reproductive technology. The problem is an obvious one, and that is that this isn't a huge area of law as far as work is concerned. And so in many areas you'll have a handful of attorneys that have significant experience in assisted reproductive technology law, whereas you could have thousands, and in some cases of tens of thousands of lawyers that have some significant experience with domestic relations or criminal matters in comparison. You also want to make sure that you talk to a lawyer who has information, preferably actually practicing in the jurisdiction that you're going to be working in. And again, with special emphasis placed upon the jurisdiction where the child is going to be born. And because the fact is that I don't think any lawyer has all of that information from all 50 states. I certainly don't. And it's a process we're spending a little bit of time on. Also, as part of that consideration is you should look at some of the legal problems concerning insurance. And one of the things that I believe that you'll find is that there's an extraordinarily diverse vision to available insurance covering the pregnancies, and for some of our international clients actually covering the care for the babies born to the surrogate. Some states simply have provisions in their state law that requires covering of surrogates under those circumstances. Wisconsin's a good example of that. And other states have a reputation for making it extraordinarily difficult to gain full coverage for a surrogate during her pregnancy. Important questions to ask. Look at the information that's out there and available. Most states have that information available, and that is also something that the individual surrogacy agency should be able to help with. Looking a little bit at the contracts that you are going to be asked to sign, and I'm going to talk primarily about the contract between the intended family and the surrogate. Let me first start by saying that the whole purpose, and I'm hoping I can get some agreement on this, of the contract is to establish a healthy, capable, effective, and hopefully even close relationship between the surrogate and the intended family. It often doesn't work that way, but certainly if you have people who are being thoughtful about it, it can work that way. The interesting thing about it for us to start with is that in so many of our work with straight couples, we find that there isn't much interest in maintaining a relationship with the surrogate past the point of birth. Our gay families are consistently on the other side of that issue, most of them wanting to maintain a relationship with a surrogate. And the fact is that our gay families are much better at establishing and maintaining those relationships with the surrogate than our straight couples. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. One suggestion is that at that point the surrogate's the only woman in the relationship. The other is, as I mentioned before, the intended family, the gay intended family, oftentimes wants to maintain a relationship with them. The contract has got several purposes. One of them is to establish expectations. Another one of the purposes of the contract is to get people to sit down and start to talk about some of the important and more difficult issues. If you look at the contracts overall and that relationship, it's absolutely essential that you be prepared to embrace some of the risk that goes along with that. The risk can be really quite substantial. And that has to do with the nature of the work, the nature of the contract, and what you're asking people to do. Most obvious example, I think, is that if many of our families tell us that they would like to choose to terminate a pregnancy under circumstances where there are where something significantly medically is wrong with the baby. And although it's an extraordinarily rare occurrence, the contracts that I see almost universally refer to that as a subject. There's no way that that kind of a provision is enforceable. It just simply can't happen and won't happen. And understanding that at the get-go is important. Another example of provisions in the contract that aren't enforceable are the financial portions of it, where a surrogate, if she were to breach the contract, the likelihood in most cases of actually being able to both, even though you would probably be able to get a judgment against their for the amounts owed under the agreement, according to the terms of the agreement, the likelihood of actually being able to collect that against her is remote.